sending you light to hold you in love. I am sending you light to heal you, to hold you. I am sending you light to hold you in love, no matter where you go, no matter where you've been. You'll never be alone. I feel you deep within. So I'm sending you light to heal you, to hold you. I am sending you light to hold you in love. I am sending you light to heal you, to hold you. I am sending you light to hold you in love. No matter what you feel or what you choose to show, I'm always there for you. So I want you to know that I'm sending you light to heal you, to hold you. I am sending you light to hold you in love. I am sending you light to heal you, to hold you. I am sending you light to hold you in love. Have a good session. If you've got the piano. Because you got on the piano. Can I hug you? Me too. I know it is. Oh, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, shine, shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Oh, everywhere I go, I'm going, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. We're building up the world. I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine. I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine up the world. I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Awesome. This light, I'm gonna let it shine, let it light mine. I'm gonna let it shine, this little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Thank you, Tony.
So, engaging your congregation is something that a lot of us talk about with social justice work. How do we get more people involved, right? Which is often how we put it. We try to flip that question around a bit. It's not so much how do we get people to do stuff we want them to do, but how do we engage people in doing what they really want to do, which is to live out their values, right? I think that's why we're all here, because we're here to live out our values. And so engaging your congregation with grace, the word grace itself, I think, would say extending people to grace to not be the object of your activism, but more the agent of their own empowerment. Now if we can just, thank you. Oh, does this work? Wow, we got technology all over here. Oops, it should. Oh, just click. I'm going the wrong thing. Click. There it is. GRACE is an acronym for Grounded, Relational, Accountable, Capacity Building, and Effective. That grounding piece would be about, is our activism coming from a place of our values, meaning what we really hold dear and care passionately about, and what other people hold dear and hold passionately about. We are not just a political party who meets on Sunday mornings, right? I think that's the question I like to ask congregations. How are you different than another political organization doing similar work, whether it's around the environment or voting or whatever it might be? And I think it has to do, and political organizations, if they're good, have values too. But I think we want to lean into our particular values as Unitarian Universalists, which are very expansive, very obviously Universalist, and hold a vision of a society that works for all of us, and isn't necessarily about us winning and other people losing. It's about all of us winning, ideally. So how do we ground ourselves in our values and invite other people to be empowered to live out their values, and how do we do that together in a collective way, right? So grounding in our values is the first piece, is grounding. The second piece is, how do we do that in relationship with each other? You heard a lot about that this morning. It isn't just about taking our values and applying them on the street directly necessarily, but it's about how do we lean into relationships for a couple of reasons. One is, that's how we build power. We don't get things done as individuals. We get things done as communities, as collective people working together. So how do we build the relationships in our congregations, strengthen them, deepen them, so that we can move together when we are called to move together, instead of just, I'm doing this, you're doing that, and we're all living our values individually. How do we build the relationships to build power? How are we in relationship with those who are impacted by what we're doing? How are we listening, as we heard about this morning, to those who are marginalized in society, who are impacted by our actions or inaction? How are we in relationship and listening to and centering those voices? And then how are we listening to and really engaging our communities? I like to say that the idea of relationships is not just about how we make ourselves more comfortable in our congregations. It's about how do we extend that relational invitation to people, to our neighbors, to people in other organizations, even to our elected officials. Elected officials are people too, and they and things in politics get done on the basis of relationships. It's kind of in traditional politics, it's kind of who knows who and who's got the clout. Well, but those wheels are greased by relationships. We don't bring the same kind of clout, but we bring real people, we bring real stories, and if we build relationships as legislators, meaning we listen to them too, before we ask them what we want to share with them, which is, we have some values, we have some stories, we have some asks. We really do care about this stuff. We're curious what you care about, because then we can find some common ground. So thinking about relationship across the board as part of our model. Accountable. Again, that's hand in hand with the conversation this morning. How do we hold ourselves so we're not just doing what we think is right? And that could, how are we listening to those who are impacted? And the impacted are among us too. It's not just an us or them thing. It's how are we listening to the marginalized among us and around us and in our society? How are we building capacity? It's one thing to pull off an action of any sort one time, but how do we do that? So how do we set it up so we can do that again and again and again? And I'll talk about an example of that later on. And finally, how do we ask the question, what's our impact? How are we being effective? Sometimes we ask that, but sometimes we just ask ourselves, what's the next thing to do, without really asking, what are we trying to do? How will we be effective? How will we know we're being effective? And how will we reflect on what we need to learn for next time? I think that's enough about the GRACE model. We started in 2019. I was taking, the model came from doing workshops in congregations across the state, probably 15, 16 congregations, asking the question, what makes a successful social justice program? What does it look like? And this is what I gleaned from what I heard from congregations around the state. They're looking for programs that are spiritually grounded, that build relationships, that are accountable to people who are impacted. A little less about capacity, but it was in there somewhere. And then how do we actually make a difference? So it came out of workshops I did in congregations around the state. Realized I can't keep running around from congregation to congregation. We need to build some leadership in congregations. And so we started the Social Justice Leadership Corps in 2019 with 2 different cohorts being trained in the model. And then after the COVID break, we started again this year with another model and deliberately calling it the Grace Training. I'd like to invite Dee Evans, who was one of the participants in that Grace Training, to share her experiences with it. Thank you, Dee.
Good afternoon. I'm going to talk briefly about the training, then I'm going to talk about the state of my congregation, and then I'm going to talk about how I use grace training in my congregation. Thank you. I did not want to go to the grace training. I did it because in something totally unrelated, I had to check a box. So I went there to check a box. Now, there was some rationale I had for not wanting to go. I had been a long-time union member and got a lot of training in social justice through the union, and I could be a rebel rouser with all of them in a very organized way, okay? Because in my union, you obey the rules when you march. I still am a member of my union, and even though I'm retired, I went and did informational pickets when they needed people to do so. I had training besides the union, which Nicole spoke about solidarity. I learned about solidarity through my union. Then I went for another group of training. It was week-long, intensive. I paid for it. And it seemed to me to be very confrontational, and an interesting fact is research shows youths don't like confrontation. So it was no surprise that I didn't particularly love the training, though I got a lot out of it. The second problem with the training that I felt was that the one-to-ones were to try to connect their self-interest with your self-interest of your organization. So it was almost like a mercenary thing. It bothered me a lot. But I knew only halfway how to put the training from the union and the training from this organization together. And so then I walk into the grace training, figuratively walk into it, it was on Zoom, and I was like, okay, I'm here, I'm gonna listen, I'm gonna go through it. And I found a huge key difference. Grace training is rooted in relationship and love. It is not having one-to-ones with your congregation or anybody else outside of your congregation, simply to find their self-interest so you can figure out a way how to use it. Rather, it is developing a relationship, as I get the grace training, and Scott can correct me if I'm wrong, but as I took away the grace training, it was being genuinely concerned and interested in the other person. And that is what really changed for me in social justice organization, was caring about the person more than caring about how can I use their self-interest to get what I want. So I loved the grace training. And it taught me a lot. Okay. So I'm going to take this into my congregation. Let me tell you about the state of the congregation I was taking it into. I came out of seminary, came out of my internship here at Abraham Lincoln, go back to my congregation, and it is down in membership over 50%. They are deep into financial problems, not only because of the loss of membership, but also because there was embezzlement by an employee, not a minister, an employee. On top of that, there was a lot of confrontation in the church because they had come to the conclusion they had to sell the historic building because they simply did not have the money to maintain it. So there was a vote, do we stay or move? And the vote itself wasn't contentious, but everything that happened before the vote was. I was not bringing grace training into an ideal, loving congregation. And I also had to adjust because the congregation I was returning to was not the congregation I had left to go to seminary 5 years ago. But I started making appointments with people and started talking to them, just the way I was trained in the grace training. And here's what I learned. They were burnt out, completely and totally. Burnt out because of everything they had gone through the congregation. They were burnt out and felt, I can't do any more social justice. A lot of my congregation is gray-haired like I am. And they were like, I've been doing this all my life. I don't think I can do anymore. And the third thing I met was huge discouragement. Look at what has happened to our world. Everything I worked for is falling apart. What if I do anything, then what? But what I came away with in all these conversations was, if I could do something like write letters, and I said, oh, are you a member of UUANI? Yeah. Do you get their newsletter? Yeah. Would you be willing to follow through on those newsletters? Yeah. And then, again, to check another box, I joined Sierra Club and discovered they needed permits looked at. Now, I had no idea such a thing happened, but companies apply in air and water with the Illinois Environmental Protection Association in order to go forward with whatever their projects are. And those projects are put on their website. And you can see everything they want to do, every good thing and every negative thing. And what Sierra Club wanted us to do was to look at the permits and then tell Sierra Club, we need to do something about this. Well, I said, we're not scientists. I don't know what to tell you to do, but what we can do is tell you that these permits seem like Sierra Club should act on them. And I found out that members of my congregation were willing to become part of this group that looks at permits. And it is tedious because you got to look at them at least 3 or 4 times a week because you never know when they're going to come up. And Sierra Club or any organization only has 30 days to respond to these permits. So I found out something. By really listening to my congregation, I changed my opinion. It isn't that they weren't willing to do social justice. They just didn't know how to do it. In the midst of selling a building, moving, and having what they did before feel like a failure. Nicole used the word today. She said, we're really bad at wide-range, durable justice. And I thought that's exactly what my congregation members were telling me. I worked for this and now it is falling apart. And you want me to go back and work for it again? I don't know if I have it in me to do that. And by really listening non-judgmentally, what I learned is take what they are willing to do and it can become effective. And so that's what I got out of grace training. And let me tell you, I'm so proud of what my congregation is doing because we are making a difference. And I'm so glad I attended the training. Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Bill Sasso, still, and I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of like 5 years in 5 minutes, so it may go by a little bit fast, but don't worry, I'll make sure that you have as much information about what I said as you want, or possibly more. I'm speaking about the Carbondale Unitarian Fellowship, and it's our process and our experience with an annual congregation-wide social justice campaign, which was something we first tried in 2019. As a matter of fact, in February of 2019, we had a congregational meeting and we adopted a strategic plan by congregational vote. And the strategic plan said that one of our objectives was to develop a fellowship-wide approach to social justice. Congregation's members were enthusiastic about this and also pretty clueless about what it actually meant, because none of us had ever done anything like that before, and the congregation certainly hadn't. But the previous month, in January of 2019, 3 members of the fellowship, including me, made the 6-hour trek to Oak Park, Illinois, to attend the first Social Justice Leadership Corps training program, which was a day-long workshop in Chicago, at Oak Park actually, and then monthly tutorial sessions with our group with Scott via Zoom. Over the course of the tutorials, the 3 of us identified something we thought might be an appropriate theme for a congregation-wide campaign. That happened to be immigration justice in Southern Illinois. And we started to articulate what that could mean for the fellowship in terms of actually doing it. We also sketched out a process for how we thought this might come to the congregation. So once we had the theme and we had a description to start with, the process included these steps. The proposal was discussed and endorsed by the Social Action Committee. The proposal was discussed and endorsed, or at least sort of endorsed, by the Board of Trustees. The board put it on the agenda for the congregational meeting. I don't know if they actually said, we're endorsing this, but they put it on the agenda. There were multiple forms of communication about this to the congregation. There were newsletter articles, there were things we called congregational dialogues, which were informal discussion sessions. Anybody could show up, anybody could ask what questions they wanted to. They could make suggestions, they could tell us why this was a bad idea, they could tell us why it was a great idea. And that helped us hone the proposal further. At the May annual congregational meeting, there was more discussion, and the proposal was approved. And of course, that was the easy part, because then we had to do the work that we had been talking about. So we voted in May 2019, and one of the very first things we did was to have, there was a action of the week, a UUANI action of the week that related to immigration justice. And so after our service was over at the coffee hour, social hour, we had a number of computers where people could actually do the action of the week in relation to that. Since May 2019, we've used this process as a baseline for adoption of additional subsequent annual social justice campaigns, each one of them approved by the congregation at our annual meeting. The first year, 2019-2020, was immigration justice in Southern Illinois. 2020-2021 was Vote Love, or UU the Vote, participation in that. 2021-22 was mental health and social justice. We took a year off because we didn't feel like we have to do this every year. It's going to be routine and automatic or something. And then in 2023-24, the current year, reproductive justice is the central theme. In designing each one of these campaigns, we attempted to include a wide range of activities, different things different people could do. Those ranged from Sunday services, so essentially showing up at a Sunday service about immigration justice or reproductive justice would mean you had participated. Book discussions. You know, there are people who can talk about books, and that's all they can do. If they talk about a book that relates to reproductive justice, they've done something. And it might get them to take the next step after reading the book and talking about it. But we also did service activities that relate to the themes. We've done advocacy with state and local officials, and I guess if you count some of the UUNI actions of the week, even national officials, elected officials, and collaboration with and support of the communities who are most directly affected by these themes. We've reached out to work with other organizations whose values aligned with ours. Sometimes we've seen that work that started in one annual campaign continues. For example, our voter registration team, which was part of the 2020, it was formed in 2020. That continues today, and we have plans in relation to the 2024 March primary and November election. While we didn't vote on a 2022-23 campaign, a great deal of congregational energy that year went into sponsorship of an Afghan refugee family in the Carbondale area. And 7 members of the fellowship formed a formal sponsor circle. That's one of the programs by which people assist refugees who come to this country. That was really an extension, a deep intensification, and a focus of our earlier immigration justice campaign. We'd be very glad to share from our experiences. You can contact me either here or some other place, and I'd be glad to provide more information. I have also emailed both these comments that I just shared with you and a copy of one of our first, actually it was our first, the Immigration Justice in Social Illinois, Immigration Justice in Southern Illinois. The proposal that actually went to the congregation to Scott, and he can make them available online. I also have hard copies of those, which I'd be happy to pass out, but I don't know if this is the time to do it. So that's my piece. I guess maybe we'll have questions and answers at the end or something if there's time.
Any questions online?
Sure, go.
So my question is,
Here, I'm gonna give you a mic.
is that okay? That way everyone can say it once? Okay. My question is that initial process that you outlined where you sketched out a goal and a strategy for the proposal, and then it was discussed and then endorsed by your social action committee and then kind of by the board and then congressional dialogues, and then you voted on it at your all congregation meeting. Did you do that process every single year for each of the new initiatives?
Yes. Yeah. Each one is independent.
Okay.
And we have never really run into a situation where there were 3 proposals coming forward at the same time, which would have been an interesting, we haven't had that experience yet, where, you know, kind of some group, there's an environmental proposal and there's a, you know, kind of racial justice related proposal, and there's a third proposal about economic justice or something, and the 3 of them are kind of competing. It seems to have been an experience where at most there's a lot of energy for one thing. Reproductive justice this particular year probably didn't surprise anybody, you know? Yeah. And it's been a good process. I mean, it sort of develops a sense of this isn't something the Social Action Committee is doing to the congregation. It's something the Social Action Committee is inviting the congregation to deliberate on and come to a conclusion about. Great. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we have to learn how to do this so that the folks who are on Zoom can be part of the show too.
No, this is great. I'm just curious to know, so does the Social Action Committee develop the program and then present it? I mean, is there a process in which how they decide which campaigns they actually do decide to go about before they send it to the board and then to the congregation?
Yeah, and it's also like it evolves through that process. I mean, it's sort of, things will change as we go forward in the process, and that's the way it's supposed to be, right? I mean, it's not like somebody figures it all out and everybody else ratifies it. It's more like people ask questions and, you know, have you thought about this? Should we partner with this organization? sometimes it's easy to partner with some organizations, and sometimes it's more of a challenge. There was, what has typically happened is the Social Action Committee has typically opened the discussion. And usually, as I said, usually there's energy for something. And it's oftentimes based on what's happening in the community and sometimes in the world or the nation. The UU, the vote, and reproductive justice are certainly not local to Carbondale.
Thank you. That's awesome.
Just a quick, I like this idea because it's one of the concerns that I've always had. I'm from, Anna Saban from ALUUC, is when you try to do everything, you end up doing nothing sometimes. And so the idea of doing this helps because you are doing something. My question though is because sometimes, to do this, you have to develop relationships and cultivate relationships outside of the congregation within your community. And so if you're focusing on this for 1 year, it takes time to develop those relationships, and then what?
Yeah.
Because you're constantly having to develop new relationships with a new group of people every year. So I didn't know if you had any ideas as to how to work through that.
Well, I have some experiences at the very least, and two things you said make me want to highlight something. On the golden colored sheets that I passed out, not in my remarks right now, but on the other side, the proposal to the congregation, one of the things that we felt was really important was we're doing this thing as an annual campaign we want the entire congregation to be involved in. That doesn't mean we're going to stop doing everything else we've ever done in terms of community support or social justice work. So it wasn't like you're choosing this thing and leaving, we didn't want to say, no, we're not going to do these things we've always done, whether it's cooking at a soup kitchen or whatever it might be. This was kind of on top of those things, and there was always significant energy. The relationships especially with external organizations, right? In many cases, there was at least some relationship there beforehand, which is part of what prompted the proposal to come forward. So with respect to immigration justice, there was a local immigration rights group called SIRP, Southern Illinois Immigrant and Refugee Project. And we had a working relationship with SIRP. And one of the interesting dynamics is that actually SIRP's energy kind of faded out, especially with coronavirus. The timing of that project, it was going strong in February of 2020, and March of 2020, Illinois shut down, right? And that really decreased. So kind of the partners themselves aren't always going to stay around. With the voter UU the Vote project, we still actually have a really strong working relationship with the county clerk's office, and we've continued to do voter registration stuff. We have a continued relationship with League of Women Voters, another voter registration-oriented program. And so it's interesting that kind of these programs, it's not like we're sort of flipping the light switch and the program goes dark at the end of the year. What happens is the most committed people do tend to stay in some form of relationship, and that can come back, as the Afghan Refugee Sponsor Circle is kind of an example of, although the initial project was mainly oriented toward refugees from Central America, as opposed to refugees from Afghanistan. So it's really interesting to see how those relationships maintain, and we still, if an organization we have a working relationship with asks us to show up for something, there's an excellent chance we'll get people to show up or something like that. So we maintain the relationships as best we can, but we also, do say kind of we're doing this year. We can't reasonably guarantee we'll always be doing this with you.
I'm going to keep us moving because there's two more people
Yeah.
we want to hear from, unless
Yeah.
you wanted to add something to your thing, Dee.
I can add it.
You sure?
Happy to talk to anybody later, but somebody else's turn.
I think one of the things I found out with the grace training, because prior to the congregation becoming smaller, I was head of social justice, and I found the same problem that you have. It's too scattered. Doing the one-to-ones through the grace training, it became clear to me that instead of just having the social justice committee pick something, that the congregation had a flow toward ecological justice. That kept coming up repeatedly and repeatedly. So that helped us center in on that issue. I don't know if that answers your question.
So, doing this kind of an all-congregation yearly project is one way of implementing the grace training. There are other ways, but it's a good one, right? And I'll talk about how Unity Temple did it on a quarterly basis later on, perhaps. But one of the other things that we have done even more recently with the grace training, or since the grace training, is develop a catalyst, congregational catalyst program. Because it obviously takes leadership to make stuff like this happen, right? And you're all leaders, so you know what we're talking about. But how do we build capacity for this to happen on a regular basis, especially the relational work, which is very time intensive, right? I mean, it's literally talking to people one-to-one, and they add up over time, but it does take time. So Bill and Karen were a couple of people that developed this model of a congregational catalyst who is literally hired, or I don't know if that's the right word, but is contracted with, for a couple hours a week, somebody from the congregation pays half or a third, you and I will pay a half or a third of their time for a year to sit down with people, have one-to-one conversations, connect them with opportunities that exist in the congregation, or maybe you'll surface something that needs to be paid attention to, and maybe you'll surface things that you can let go of. Because part of capacity building is actually, the earlier version of this model is something called GAFO, and the F was for fit. Does this fit your congregation's capacity? And your congregation probably doesn't have capacity to save the world in all the issues, right? Maybe just one. So pick one or two or three, and even the largest congregations have really worked at that, and are still working in that. It's like, we can't do it all. There's something even white supremacist about trying to do it all, right, and being white saviors. So let's get humble and get real, and look at what our real capacity is, and match our program to match our real capacity for congregation. So I digress. We were talking about Catalyst, the Catalyst program. This is a program that's available to your congregation if you have someone who's willing to go to the grace training starting in January. I'm going to invite Gilletta up to share her experience. Gilletta happens to be from the same congregation that Bill is from, so they have really taken this grace training and run with it. And just share experiences with how it's gone in Carbondale with the Catalyst program. And then I'll invite KT to share as well.
Hello. As Scott said, I'm Gilletta Brandt. I am the Congregational Catalyst from the Carbondale Unitarian Fellowship. I guess I would start out by saying we have a very strong social action team and mindset already in Carbondale. We're a small area, so I would say what he was talking earlier about making connections. We already probably have a lot of members who are connected with various social action initiatives in our area just by virtue of being a small area, so that helps. Scott sent me a few questions that I thought I would just try to address in my few minutes here. The first question was, what have I done in my role as catalyst? I have conducted several one-on-one conversations, I think 14 at my last count. The majority of those were with members new to the fellowship. Since the pandemic, we've actually grown a little bit since the pandemic and attracted some new members. So I was able to get to know them better, get to know their issues they were interested in, things that they might want to participate in at some point. And that helped me a great deal in my role as catalyst. I didn't do any specific asks of anybody, would you join this, committee or anything. but it was still good. So at least now I have in the back of my mind, like, this person has an interest in this area, and if something comes up, I might approach them about that. And I didn't feel like I was there with an agenda, like specifically to ask them for something. Another question was, how has it worked, like joys and challenges to this position? I feel it worked pretty well. Everyone I asked to meet actually agreed to meet with me. A few we're still trying to, schedule because of busy schedules and things, but no one just told me no. I mean, everyone actually seemed willing to meet with me, even if they didn't know why I wanted to meet with them. So I was very pleasantly surprised about that. I enjoyed meeting with the people, as I said, and learning about them, getting to know about them, where they came from, their histories, and their interest. I did emphasize, even though I didn't do a specific ask, that I was a resource for them. Come see me if you have any interest in anything, any questions about the fellow. I just wanted them to know I'm a resource for them, no matter what the question is. And I just felt like that built a little bit of rapport, if nothing else did. So I'm also on my Sunday services team at our fellowship, and probably one of my wins, I guess I would say, is one person I spoke with. I learned that they had expertise in an area, and then we had a Sunday service about it. So I approached that person and asked them if they were willing to speak, and they did. And had I not had that one-on-one, I wouldn't have known that, wouldn't have known to approach them. And so at least I felt like that was very helpful in this instance. Another question was, what impact has it had on the congregation? I found this hard to answer because I think that's more of an external, being the person here, I can't really answer. I don't know if any impact I've had on it. I was already fairly involved in some other areas in our fellowship, so it's not easy to separate my role as catalyst from other areas. And so I asked other people what they thought, and Bill Sasso was kind enough to send me a little thing I'll read here. He says, the Catalyst has helped us connect with newcomers and re-engage longer-term members, not only through the one-on-ones that I have conducted, but through those that other members of the Catalyst supervision team have done. The supervision team meetings have themselves had a positive impact on our social justice efforts by providing a context for leaders to discuss upcoming efforts, evaluate priorities and needs, and consider how our efforts might relate to statewide initiatives through interaction with Scott at UUANI on a monthly basis. And then finally, what have I learned in this role? Well, I've learned a lot. The GRACE training was a wonderful way to give a new lens to meeting with people and how to view things. I am naturally social, so I don't have a problem with approaching people and just striking up a conversation. So that part wasn't difficult for me, though it may be for a lot of people. And as I said, the one-on-ones, I didn't have anybody who gave me any grief, and everyone agreed to meet with me. I did learn that during these one-on-ones, I don't like asking for things. That's my failing, not the training. But again, I don't see it as like I had an agenda. I'm just trying to get to know the person so that I can perhaps help them in the future. One of the things when they were talking about this 10th anniversary was they wanted me to, find people to attend a watch party. I found that very daunting, and I'm like, oh my God, they're actually asking me to do something, and I have to have people show up, and and I think I had 11 people registered. I was like, yes, so why they registered, I don't know, but they did, so thank you. So it's been great because not only have I learned about other people, but I've learned some of my own strengths and weaknesses in this role. I've really enjoyed it. I would encourage anyone who has any interest, at least look into it, or if you know people in your congregation who might enjoy it. But if you get nothing else from it, you get to have one-on-one conversations with great people in your congregations and learn more about them. And, that's valuable even if nothing comes of it. So thank you very much.
We have another catalyst in the Rockford congregation. They're actually leading another session. But again, if this is something that sounds like it might be interesting for your congregation to try out, let's talk about it. We also have this year an intern, Katie Ingram, is in Bloomington, specifically focused on organizing with black and brown UUs across the state. So I'll invite you to share your experiences so far.
So I will admit I'm a bit nervous, so if I shake up a little bit. So greetings you all, I'm Katie Ingram, a current intern with UUANI. My job has been many things in these past few months, including adaptability. In this position, I become a storyteller, interest gatherer, connection builder, student, and inquirer full of questions and curiosities. Charged with bringing us all together in a profound, semi-disconnected way, it seems to be for me, nations away. But today we stand present together in a grace breakout group. I believe mental mapping is the absolute importance of grace at this time to address flexibility, love, community, understanding, and connectedness, to genuinely be held by a warming thread of conscious peace and fight together and separately. I have had the opportunity to know the love that exists and also hear the fire torch change in the hearts, minds, bodies, and souls of those spoken. Beautiful, joyful voices with challenges of wishing there could be more conversations that spark tougher conversations and actionable steps. Belonging to individuals who have always felt cast away, unwelcome to speak, or free to be freely in peace, solitude, and connectedness. I have learned we have a long way to go, but hearts filled with desires for harvest, shifts in paradigms, and safer and more inclusive spaces and communities. I learned there is still a fight for freedom for the people every day. The ones I read about on bookshelves in the 2000s of change, the freedom fighters are aging wisdom. And calls for spirit, transformation, and uncovering inspirational change and growth. Each day is a new day for a new idea, advancement, strategy, and connection. As we are a puzzle piece, creating a picture that can be the roadmap to our freedom or someone else's, this experience is a reminder that somewhere in the world, people stand together as one still. With hope for a revitalization of the power of the people, we still stand. And that's what I learned as an intern.
Questions for Gilletta or KT about the kind of one-to-one relational work they've been doing across the state or in their congregations? Or about anything else you've heard so far? Microphone? Bill, thank you.
Testing, okay. KT, you said you connected with other people. I was actually a recipient of that connection and appreciate it. Thank you for that. What was your most memorable conversation out of all the people that you talked to on this like one-on-one to try to recognize how to be more inclusive and thought-provoking and doing that mental mapping that you so suggested? What did you gain from it?
So I believe it was my first conversation, impeccable individual. They were the first Black woman for a lot of things in their area. And I think that it was beautiful for me because they were an older person, I younger, but I could still see myself and how open and vulnerable they were willing to be in that moment to sit with me and let me know where it all started and how they got here and what keeps them here today. I think that was really my first big conversation because she was the stereotype of what we, the person that, Black, person of color, LGBTQ. And I think established that she's still fighting for something so much bigger and she's been doing it for such a long time. So for me, it was inspirational that people are out here with voices maybe not heard at the most, But I think that she was a reflection of a testimony of when it does happen. And so I think that was life-changing for me to experience that individual and see the work that they were doing, and that it's possible to keep going in the fight.
Thank you, Katie and Shatria. I want to invite people online. You're on YouTube. There is a chat on YouTube if you can find it. I don't know if there are any questions yet, but please feel free to put in the YouTube chat any questions for anything you've heard so far. Anybody else in the room? Willa, yeah.
All right, I have 3 quick questions, and they may sound too administrative, but in the Congregational Catalyst program, is it designed to change the catalyst yearly? That's the first question.
It's a pilot project, so we're going to do whatever works.
Oh, okay.
We don't know.
Second question, and this could be could be determined by the congregation themselves. I don't know. Did you have to go through a process? Were you appointed by the board or approved by your board? Was there a process for that? Okay, and since you're going to come answer, no, that's okay. And then I wanted to know, to whom do you report? You're learning all this great stuff, and
Yes, we had an application process through our fellowship, and I don't know how many actually applied, but it did. Then I did have to go through my board that they approved me to go forward to be, to be the one to the UUANI, whether or not they wanted me to continue. What was your second question?
well, that was the second
Oh, yeah.
question. The first one is just because it's a pilot program now, but the last question was, do you report?
Oh, yes. We have like a mini committee, which is our Reverend Bill, who's our Reverend Emeritus, our Social Actions Chair, and our board president. And those 4 I meet with. I send them and Scott like a weekly email updating them what I've been doing the week. And then all of us actually do a monthly Zoom meeting where we discuss things, that have happened and things we want to look forward to. Okay.
And let me just jump in while you're getting the microphone over. That's actually a version of a model that's been tried at Unity Temple, which is kind of a strategy team. It's kind of a smaller group of people, including ministerial leadership, who kind of think through what are we trying to do as a congregation, not what is our equal justice team or immigration team trying to do, but what are we trying to do as a congregation? And my understanding, that's been a useful process for Carbondale.
I think you just almost answered that my question. Is it only for social justice? We are doing a anti-racism, multicultural assessment of our church, and having discussions with members of our church would be great. But a training like this could help get more people involved in doing these one-on-one discussions. Is that something that would be? Could we use Grace as that sort of as a model for us to develop that strategy?
I don't see why not. That there is an issue with UUNI is going to have an interest in how is this going to work with our statewide organizing. I think that's been a question that's come up with some of the programs so far. So we'll have to talk about that. But in theory, the Grace model is about relational organizing, which can be used for any purpose. Frankly, it can be used for hands-on social justice work as well as legislative advocacy. It can be used for anti-racism, anti-oppression work. Frankly, it's actually a membership function in a lot of ways, and so in some cases, the same person who is doing, I've seen cases where the social justice person lead is also the membership lead, because there's so much overlap when you have people coming into the congregation, and such a high percentage of our folks coming into our congregations are becoming because they want to get involved with social justice. So it could be used for membership, and again, Evanston is doing that. They have a membership catalyst of their own, kind of speak. They kind of took the idea and did it on their own without us. But so the answer is yes, I think we could do that. I think at least let's talk about it. Yeah. Other questions? Again, anybody on chat? Tony, okay.
So I'm Tony Toller from DeKalb, but I'm wondering if the Grace model might also not be a wonderful vehicle to work with our youth and to bring in youth. Now, in our congregation, the number one topic in youth is GLBTQ issues, because it's a safe haven for those kids that are non-identify or don't wish to identify, and for those that might be going through some transitions. And so they feel very safe there, but they're kind of isolated. And I'm just wondering that maybe UUA and I could see a road to drawing them into our mission, because that certainly is social justice, as well as I think young people are very concerned about climate change. And certainly when you get into the younger 20-year-olds, I think even abortion and some of those issues. So I just wanted to throw that out there because I think that's a place we're not tapping.
I love the creative thinking going on here. Again, why not, right? That would be something that I don't have particular expertise in working with youth and young adults. We have had a youth and young adult program called Yaya Justice. So we had an intern at one time who was doing something along these lines back before we did the training. So again, it's a possibility. And it's like, yeah, let's think about that. Let's see if we can make that happen. But we need to bring in some resources who really know how to work with young youth and young folk better than I do. Dee.
Because our church is selling the building, they have sold the building. I was on the pastoral care committee also, because we have a very small church and you do double duty. I found the Grace model so helpful in just listening to people about how they felt about the move and about selling the church. And I found by just following the Grace model and just listening, not trying to convince them, oh, we have to move because we cannot maintain this old historical but just listening, they would talk themselves into, oh, I guess we do need to move. And I didn't have to say a word. So I found it, if you're asking where else it could be used, I found it useful in pastoral care also.
Cool. I promised we'd talk about Unity Temple. I'll do it in 2 minutes. I was actually an intern there 12 years ago, I think now, and became their first social justice minister a year after that. And I was kind of intuitively using this model based on a training that I'd gotten from Community Renewal Society, which has a version of this that we've developed for more specific UU focus. The story goes like this. Well, let me back into it. So last month, one of the ministers at Unity Temple convened a meeting to reset their social justice work because they lost their social justice minister. And gathered a group of 18 folks, I think Willa was there, and asked, so what do you want to do now? And what should our social justice program look like? And it ended up being, again, pretty much this list. Okay, I was in the room, I added a couple of pieces, but it was pretty much that list. And Emily told the story of, 15 years ago, our social ministry committee, was what it's called, was a small group of activists who each had their own pet projects or pet causes and got together to kind of convince each other why they should each help each other, come and do my thing and you come and do your thing, but not even specifically. It's like, no, this is what we're doing and how can we get everybody to do my thing? And it was kind of a round table of how can we get people to do what we want them to do, which is what I said at the beginning. Again, Grace flips that on its head, and Unity Temple over the last 15 years has flipped it on its head. It's like, this is not, I don't think it's primarily about getting people to do stuff that the social ministry committee wants them to do. It's become a network of people. They're calling it a faith and action network, and even the language has changed, right? From social ministry to faith and action. And it's based on, Colleen Vahey was the minister who developed, the social justice minister who developed the model of spiritually grounded, relationally accountable, strategically effective. That was her creation. And their meetings, I've been to their meetings, they always start with a very deep centering. Often there's some relational time. We've even have meetings where we just take the first 10, 15 minutes to do one-on-ones with each other. Just do that in your meetings. Bring the relationship building into your meetings. Accountability. They partner with an organization called Community Renewal Society, which is based at the time, and still is black and brown churches in the south side of Chicago and west side of Chicago. Built a relationship, and the short story is, if I can make it short here, I came back from the training with Community Renewal Society and started doing one-on-ones and built a team of 5 people to do one-on-ones to invite people to a congregational training about this stuff, basically. 40 people, it's a large congregation, 40 people came to the training and got 84 people to show up to the Martin Luther King event with CRS the next month. it just went like that. Because like once you get people on fire, talking to each other, and being invited on a personal level to how can we as a congregation live out our values, it wasn't even about the issues that CRS was talking about. It's about how are we living out our UU values. I knew we'd hit critical mass when I heard two people in coffee hour talking to each other and saying, hey, are you going to that thing next month with CRS? It's like, yeah, neither of these people had ever been involved with social justice before, but because it was something the congregation was doing, they were on board, because it was, this is what we're doing as UUs. So having built that turnout capacity, when the Marriage Equality Campaign came calling in 2013, can you turn out people in front of Representative Ford's office next Monday? This was a Thursday. Can you turn out people? 40 people showed up over the course of a weekend. 40 people showed up, 60 others from the community, and within a week, Rep. Ford had switched from being on the fence about marriage equality to being a yes vote. He was the 61st vote. It took 60 votes to pass. He was one of the people that helped get it over the edge. Unity Temple, UU has made a difference in making marriage equality happen in 2013. But they didn't stop there. When the Village of Oak Park decided we're not going to keep doing green energy, we're going to go to fossil fuels again, they showed up at the village council meeting and said, not on our watch. They showed up, I think they had 35 people showed up at a village council meeting and turned that decision around. When 2017 happened, 2016 election happened, and it was time to make Oak Park a welcoming community, Unity Temple showed up in force to make sure that Oak Park had one of the strongest welcoming congregation statutes in the state. So it can happen. I'm hearing the gong, it's time to go. I'm gonna put a QR code up. If you'd like to sign up for either the Grace Training or the Catalyst program, you can put your cell phone to photo and a little link will pop up and you just click the link and you'll get right to the sign up form. Thank you all. We're gonna move on to the next sessions.